Some men leave war behind. Others carry it under their skin, quiet as a shadow. What happens when someone finally notices? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to follow every chapter of this journey. Jimmy Kramer didn't walk like a janitor. He didn't slump or shuffle or roll his shoulders like the other old guys you saw sweeping up after elite Navy candidates. He moved like someone who still expected sniper fire from rooftops. Silent, precise, never more than a foot away from a wall when moving down a hallway. Most of the younger guys just saw the limp and figured he'd been in some kind of warehouse accident back in the day. They never thought much about how his eyes scanned the corners of the room first, or how he always chose a spot near an exit when he mopped the mess hall. No one ever questioned it, because no one cared. Well, almost no one. Brandon Ellis, cocky, loud, halfway through Phase 2 of SEAL training and already acting like he'd been crowned king of the teams, noticed Jimmy in the worst kind of way. Not out of respect, out of sport. The same way you notice an old vending machine in the hallway that makes a weird noise when it turns on. Ellis was the kind of candidate who used arrogance like body armor. He was smart, sharp enough to have graduated with honors from Ohio State, but he carried himself like rules were made for other people, especially rules about respecting non-essential personnel. "Hey," Ellis said one morning as Jimmy passed through the candidate locker bay, pushing his mop bucket. "You miss a spot, old man." Jimmy didn't break stride, didn't blink, just kept pushing the bucket. It squeaked faintly against the tile floor. That irritated Ellis more than if the man had snapped back at him. "I said you missed a spot," Ellis repeated, louder this time, stepping into Jimmy's path. Jimmy stopped. He turned his head just slightly, not enough to make it a confrontation, but enough to make it clear he heard. His eyes met Ellis's for a second. "Yeah," Jimmy said flatly. "So did you." Then he turned and continued pushing the bucket. Behind Ellis, a couple of the other candidates smothered laughter. Cadet Olson let out a muffled "damn" and nudged Cadet Brooks with an elbow. "Who the hell does he think he is?" Ellis hissed, face burning, but no one answered, because they'd all seen that look in the janitor's eyes. Just for a second, like a storm behind glass. Like someone who'd seen people die up close and had made peace with it a long time ago. They didn't talk about it, but they noticed. And when Jimmy passed through the mess hall an hour later, none of them said a word. Except Olivia Brooks. Brooks wasn't a loudmouth like Ellis. She didn't run her mouth or swagger into rooms. She paid attention. And that tattoo, that odd, faded mark peeking out just above the collar of Jimmy's work shirt, had caught her eye. It was just a flash, but it looked like something she'd seen once in a restricted briefing during Indoc. A trident with wings, something old school. That night she looked it up. Didn't find anything exact, but the resemblance to early SEAL team iconography was unsettling. A few versions of that trident had been worn by operators during classified missions in the 1980s and 1990s, especially those rumored to be part of Black Squadron, the precursor to what would become de Vigru's most secretive element. The janitor? No way, that was the point of it all, right? Just a ghost in the hallway. But the next morning, Brooks lingered in the rec room a little longer than usual. She didn't say anything when Jimmy came in to mop, just nodded. And this time, Jimmy nodded back. The days passed. Every time Ellis saw the janitor, something twisted in his gut. He didn't know why it bothered him so much. Maybe it was how everyone else had started, not talking but noticing, treating the guy like he mattered. And that tattoo. That damn tattoo. Once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Ellis started asking around, first quietly, then more bluntly. "Who is that guy, the janitor? Anyone know his story?" Most shrugged. "He's just always been here," Olson said. Brooks said nothing, just stared at her tray. But Master Chief Ramirez had noticed too, and unlike the SEAL candidates, he had a memory long enough to know what that tattoo meant. It wasn't official, it wasn't in any database, but he'd seen that mark once, years ago, on a man who only existed in oral stories passed down at the compound. He walked past Jimmy in the corridor that evening, paused, and then doubled back. "You still cleaning up after people, huh?" he said without turning his head. Jimmy didn't stop mopping. "Old habits." Ramirez nodded, then smiled. "Thought you were dead." Jimmy gave a small shrug. "Close enough." They didn't say anything else, but something had shifted. And the next day, the commandant's office sent out a base-wide notice. "All support personnel will be included in next week's Respect and Honor Day ceremony. Attendance mandatory." It was the first time such a thing had ever happened. Ellis scowled when he saw the notice pinned to the board. Then he noticed a second thing: Brooks staring at the old man again from across the room, watching him as if he were a loaded weapon left carelessly in the hallway. And maybe, just maybe, he was. The compound's gym echoed with grunts, weights clanking, and the rhythmic thud of gloves on heavy bags. It was a place built for sweat and struggle, where reputations were forged under pressure and pain. The candidates called it the Pit, and not because anyone told them to. It just felt right. You either thrived here or you broke. Brandon Ellis loved the Pit. It was where he shined the most. In his mind, it was where he proved he belonged. He could outlift, outrun, outfight most of the others, and he made sure they knew it. Today, he was on the pull-up bar, shirtless, sweat streaking down his back, barking a number with each rise. 36, 37. Brooks walked in, tucked in behind Olson, both of them quietly heading to the treadmills. She didn't look at Ellis. She hadn't really said much to him in days. Not since that little hallway episode with the janitor. 43, 44. He dropped from the bar, chest heaving, and let his gaze fall across the room. Jimmy was there, on the far wall, mopping again, like some damn ghost that never left. Ellis narrowed his eyes. "You ever notice he's always around?" he muttered, toweling his neck. Olson grunted. "Yeah? That's what janitors do. Weird, huh?" "No, I mean like always," Ellis pressed. "Mess hall, corridors, armory, access hallway, now the gym. So maybe he's got a clone. You obsessing over a janitor now?" Ellis didn't laugh. He was watching Jimmy's hands. Methodical, calm, moving with the kind of efficiency you didn't see in guys pushing a mop. There was no wasted motion, no shuffling. It was almost military. "Merks," Ellis called out, tone casual, but baited with challenge. She slowed the treadmill just enough to hear. "What? You ever figure out what his tattoo means?" She stared ahead, adjusted her speed. "I didn't say I was looking into it." Ellis smiled, but there was no warmth. "You didn't have to." She didn't answer. That silence irritated him more than a snarky comeback would have. She knew something. He was sure of it now. He waited until the gym was nearly empty. Jimmy had just finished with the far corner, pushing the bucket slowly toward the supply closet. His shoulders didn't slump with fatigue. If anything, he looked like he was just getting started. Ellis followed him. When Jimmy opened the utility door and stepped inside, Ellis wedged his foot in the gap. Jimmy turned. "Need something?" "You were never just a janitor," Ellis said, arms folded. Jimmy's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Never said I was." "So what were you? A cook, clerk, spook?" "You should focus on phase 2, Jimmy replied, reaching past the door for a towel. "You're a little behind on navigation." Ellis bristled. "How the hell do you know that?" "Another beat?" "I hear things," Jimmy said, not looking at him. "Bad ears, not deaf." Ellis stepped fully into the closet. "You're not fooling anybody, you know." Jimmy finally looked at him, mop now resting on its side. There was no threat in his eyes, but there was a weight, a stillness, like the quiet before a detonation. "I'm not here to fool anyone." "Then what are you doing here?" Jimmy paused, wiped his hands on the towel. His voice was even, but it hit like gravel, leaning up after men who think they've already proven something. Alice blinked. Jimmy stepped closer, not aggressive, just present. Taller than Alice remembered, stronger looking too up close. "I don't wear stripes anymore, son. I don't wear a trident either. But I earned mine the hard way. And I watched good men die earning theirs." "So what, now you sweep floors to remind yourself of that?" Ellis shot back, voice sharp. Jimmy looked past him, as if addressing something further away than the closet walls. "No," he said. "I sweep floors because it reminds me of who I used to be, and maybe reminds others to check their ego before it gets them or someone else killed." The words lingered. Ellis stepped back like he'd been pushed. He didn't know what he expected, maybe an outburst, some shout to feed off. But this calm, measured truth rattled him more than any shove would have. Jimmy turned and began shelving the supplies without another word. Ellis laughed. That night, Master Chief Ramirez stood at the front of the candidate auditorium, clipboard in hand. "You'll all be attending Friday's recognition ceremony," he announced. "Don't roll your eyes, gentlemen. This ain't just some feel-good PR stunt. You'd do well to remember that most of your success here comes off the backs of people you don't salute." The room was quiet. Logists, cooks, admin, janitors, these people keep the mission going while you're out there getting the glory. Some of them have more time in country than all of you combined. Olson shifted in his seat. Brooks sat upright. Ellis leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And some of them," Ramirez added, lowering the clipboard, "don't need to tell you who they are. You're supposed to see it, if you've got the eyes for it." The silence stretched. No one dared to breathe. Ramirez locked eyes with Ellis just for a second, then turned to leave. And somewhere just behind the double doors, Jimmy Kramer waited in the shadows of the corridor. A man everyone thought they knew, but no one had ever really seen. Not yet. The day before the recognition ceremony, Jimmy Kramer arrived at the compound earlier than usual. He parked his old Chevy pickup, dull blue with patches of rust, out behind the maintenance sheds, same spot every day. From there he walked the perimeter, clipboard in hand, checking lock mechanisms on the gate, patrolling the fence line, eyes scanning the horizon like it was second nature. Because it was... Jimmy didn't say much to the others in facilities. They knew to leave him be. He worked clean, showed up early, stayed late. Didn't take lunch breaks, didn't ask for favors. Most of the crew thought he was just a quiet old-timer with a limp and a past nobody dared ask about. But today, something was different. Jimmy paused at the mess hall loading dock, watching two junior enlisted haul in boxes of fresh produce. His eyes lingered on a crate labeled Delta Supply Co., Annapolis. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He hadn't seen that logo since the Gulf. It used to mean you were close to something real. Deployment, movement, action. It triggered an itch in his bones he hadn't felt in years. Across the quad, Olivia Brooks sat on a bench, lacing up her boots. She wasn't supposed to notice him, but she did. She always did now. There was a tension in her face. Not fear exactly, but something like the edge of respect, the kind reserved for people you don't fully understand. She'd been asking questions, quiet ones, the kind that stay beneath the surface. "Brooks," Jimmy called out, not loud, but enough to cut through the breeze. She looked up, surprised. "You're ahead on your gear prep," he said. "You've got time for coffee?" She blinked, then nodded. They didn't talk much at first, just sat in the far corner of the mess hall where few others lingered this early. Jimmy stirred his coffee with slow, practiced hands. Brooks glanced at the tattoo again. It was clearer now in the light. An old SEAL insignia, yes, but not standard issue. The wings were slightly more curved, the anchor dented, a knife that looked real enough to cut through skin. "That's not regulation," she said finally. "No," he agreed. "It's not." "Death grew?" Jimmy sipped, didn't answer. "You were in the unit?" Still no reply. Brooks leaned back, measuring her words. They said only 3 guys made it out of Operation Cold Viper. The rest, gone. Jimmy looked at her then. Really looked. Not with warning, but with weight. I didn't make it out, he said. Not the way it mattered. She didn't know what to say to that. She looked down at her boots. Jimmy slid a napkin across the table. On it he'd written a number, a grid coordinate, an old one. She recognized the format. Field reference points used before the GPS overhaul. What's this? Where we waited for AVAC. 46 hours, no food, 3 wounded. I'd dragged 2 of them into a creek and covered us with brush. He stared into his coffee like it might bring the images back. They sent a drone, then pulled us out with a Black Hawk that didn't land, just hovered. I never went back to the teams after that. I didn't need to. She swallowed, nodding slowly. Why come here? Jimmy's jaw flexed. Because this place forgets. Brooks tilted her head. He trains warriors, then discards their memory, leaves ghosts sweeping floors. He took another sip. But I'm still here. I remember. They sat in silence after that. Meanwhile, Ellis stood outside the command building, reading a message on his phone. A forwarded email from a friend back in Virginia. It was a list of names from a classified personnel archive that had leaked. Blackbarred titles, dates of service, call signs. Most of the names meant nothing, but one stuck out. Kramer, James D. USN. Unit Red Squadron. Status retired. Clearance Tier 1. Ellis stared at it, lips slightly parted. Red Squadron. That wasn't SEAL Team 6. That was something beneath it, inside it. He looked across the compound and spotted Jimmy walking toward the main supply shed. Without thinking, Ellis moved to intercept. "Hey!" he called out. Jimmy stopped. "You were one of them?" Jimmy's shoulders shifted slightly. "One of who?" "Red, Tier 1. I saw your name." Jimmy didn't answer. "Where's Hided?" Ellis asked, stepping closer. "Why push him up when you could have retired on a beach in Coronado with a pension and a Bronze Star?" "Because a mop doesn't lie," Jimmy said. "It doesn't pretend to be a leader, it just does the work." "That's messed up, man." "No," Jimmy replied. "What's messed up is how you walk around like you've already earned a place in history. You haven't." "Not yet." Ellis opened his mouth, but Jimmy cut him off. "I've seen your type before. Smart, fast, loud, but shallow, like a puddle on concrete." Ellis flinched. "Only reason I am still here," Ginny added, voice lowering, "is to make sure someone like you doesn't get someone else killed." Ellis stepped back, jaw tightening, but he didn't say anything. He just turned and walked. That night, the base was quiet. Too quiet. Jimmy stood by the flagpole at midnight, watching the breeze roll over the empty parade ground. Behind him, the lights of the barracks glowed faintly. Inside, the next generation of warriors slept, dreaming of glory, ambition tucked under their pillows. He didn't sleep much anymore. At 047 hours, a silent ping came through on his phone, an encrypted channel, one he hadn't used in years. He stared at it for a long time, then typed a single word, "Receive," and just like that, something old began to stir. The past didn't stay buried, especially not at this compound. The morning of the recognition ceremony dawned crisp, the kind of clear day that seemed too clean for the memories it would stir. The compound buzzed with a strange energy, half confusion, half anticipation. Most of the candidates didn't fully understand why they were all being ordered into full-dress uniforms just to attend a ceremony in the mess hall. It was usually a formality, something reserved for dignitaries, visiting officers, or re-enlistment paperwork, but this time it felt different. Cadet Olivia Brooks adjusted her blouse collar in the mirror, eyeing herself with the same mixture of professionalism and curiosity she carried into every challenge. She didn't know what Jimmy was going to do today, if anything, but after the conversation they'd had in the mess hall, she had a feeling this morning wouldn't be like the others. Brandon Ellis stood nearby, buttoning his jacket, more quiet than usual, not subdued, not defeated, just thinking. He hadn't spoken to Jimmy again after that last run-in, but the image of the man standing alone outside the supply shed, eyes hard as steel, had stayed with him. There was something about facing a man who never needed to prove anything that left you looking at your own reflection a little differently. The mess hall had been transformed overnight. Folding chairs were set in rows facing a small podium. The stars and stripes hung neatly behind it, alongside the Naval Special Warfare flag. A single table near the front held framed certificates, medals, and a large brass plaque covered in black velvet cloth. Master Chief Ramirez walked to the podium at exactly 900, his uniform pristine, his eyes sharp. "Take your seats," he said. The room fell quiet. "I'm not going to stand here and give you the usual boilerplate about teamwork and excellence," Ramirez began, voice calm but carrying. "Today's about something most of you haven't learned yet, and some of you, frankly, might never." A murmur rippled through the room but faded quickly. He continued. "This facility trains the best of the best. It breaks down the body, shreds the ego, and rebuilds you into something useful, something lethal. But along the way, too many of you forget something essential." He gestured to the side of the room. "The people who sweep the floors you walk on, who refill your rations, who maintain the water in your pool. You don't salute them, but without them, you'd fall apart." At that moment, the side door opened, and Jimmy Kramer walked in, not in a janitor's uniform, in his dress whites. The trident, dulled with age, still gleamed faintly on his chest. His medals, dozens of them, lined the left side of his jacket. Purple hearts, bronze stars, a Navy cross. There was even a patch that a few recognized as coming from the classified side of De Vivaru. "Red Squadron, Ghost Team." The silence in the room thickened. Chairs creaked as some stood instinctively. Others just gawked. Jimmy didn't march. He moved, the way only someone who'd been forged in chaos could, with control, with presence, with purpose. Ramirez nodded. "Chief Petty Officer James D. Kramer," he said, "retired from active duty in 2003. Former operator, SEAL Team 6, Red Squadron." Brooks held her breath. This man served on missions that don't exist in your manuals, rescued hostages the world never knew were missing, spent 46 hours in a creek, keeping 2 bleeding teammates alive with nothing but instinct and a carbar. Ramirez turned toward Jimmy. "We failed you, Chief. This compound forgot." Jimmy stepped up beside him, expression unreadable. "But not anymore." Ramirez pulled the velvet from the plaque, revealing a new inscription. "Kramer Hall." Dedicated to Chief Petty Officer James D. Kramer. "For service beyond the call. For silence kept. For the warriors he built without them ever knowing." For a beat, no one moved. Then Brooks stood and began to clap. Alone at first. Ed Olson. Then every candidate in the room rose, the applause swelling into something deeper than noise. It became recognition. It became respect. The kind you don't earn with a loud voice or a perfect push-up record. Alice was the last to stand. When he did, he walked straight up to Jimmy. He held out his hand. "I didn't get it," he said, voice low. "But I do now." Jimmy nodded once, shaking his hand. "Good," he said. "Then you've already made it further than most." That afternoon, the plaque was mounted near the compound's main training hallway, just above the janitor's closet. The same door Jimmy had walked through for nearly 2 decades without acknowledgement. The new candidates passed it each morning, their eyes lingering. And Jimmy? He still showed up early, still swept the floors, still fixed the broken hinges and replaced the flickering lights. But now, when he walked through the mess hall, they made room. They said, "Morning, Chief," and they meant it. One afternoon, Brooks brought him a black coffee just the way he liked it. "Do you ever think of really retiring?" she asked. Jimmy looked out at the training grounds, where a new class of candidates were slogging through mud and pain. "This is the best part," he said, "watching them become something they didn't know they could be." She smiled. And they have no idea they owe it to the janitor. Jimmy chuckled softly, eyes still on the field. Good, he said. That means I did it right. And for the first time in a long while, Jimmy Kramer, chief, ghost, custodian, let himself sit down in the sun, warm coffee in hand, content to be exactly where he was. A quiet man, at peace, in a place that finally remembered him.